Hi, and welcome to Quilting with Lori. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. My name is Lori Dickman. Today, we are going to be working on 3 wonderful gifts that you can create from your scrap stash as Christmas gifts for your family or friends. We're going to be working on a birthday placemat, which is a great gift to give to any of your grandchildren or family members so they have a birthday placemat whenever their birthday happens to be. We're going to be working on a cosmetic bag, and we're going to be working on a tote bag. All of these are going to be created using Orphan blocks. This is my birthday Orphan block. Here's another Orphan block I'll be using today, and here is another Orphan block that I'll be using today. Now, all of these blocks were part of my 52-week series of Scrappy blocks. For one entire year, every Monday, I created a new Scrappy block for you that you could use your scrap stash to create. And in the description box below each and every one of those 52 videos is a free PDF for you of each of those blocks. So it gives you the instructions on what you need to pull from your stash to create the block. And then there's also an idea on how to put it together in a quilt. But you're welcome to grab all of those. You can either print them out and put them in a notebook, which is what I have done. I like to have it in paper copy. But if you don't have a printer, you can also just save it to your laptop. And you'll have 52 weeks of wonderful Scrappy blocks that you can use at any time to create some beautiful Scrappy quilts. But today, we are going to be making 3 different gifts. So let's take a peek at those gifts. And first of all, I'm going to show you what you could do with those 52 Scrappy blocks if you did make those. Here is the 52-week series sampler quilt that we put together as I worked on that 52-week series of Scrappy blocks. I used 25 of those 52 blocks and created this sampler quilt. I also teach you in that series how to do the quilt as you go technique that I really enjoy using. And so here is just a quick overview of that quilt. If you want to make this quilt or any of these blocks, I'm going to link below that 52-week playlist of Scrappy blocks, which includes this quilt as you go technique for this quilt itself. So the first block we're going to be using is the birthday block to make a placemat. I'm going to do the quilting on that. For each of these blocks that I'm using today, this one is what I'm going to use for the cosmetic bag. Each of the blocks, I will have the PDFs for how you make the blocks in the description box below, so that if you didn't make these during my series on the 52 weeks of Scrappy blocks, you can actually put them together if you choose to. Or you can just use an Orphan block that you have. All of my blocks here, my Orphan blocks, are 12.5 inches square. And then this is another Orphan block that I'm going to be using. Again, I'll have the link below on that. And then I'm simply going to use, this is for the tote bag, and I'm simply going to use a 9-patch Scrappy block for the back of the tote bag. This is going to be the front of the tote bag. And then I've got lining and so forth. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start on the birthday placemat. For this birthday block, I have started to do some quilting on it. I've added some backing and some batting, and I've just placed a couple of strips of batting together to have enough. And now I'm going to show you a little bit about the quilting, and I'm simply putting my walking foot on my machine, and I'm doing straight line quilting. In fact, I started here. I did an outline stitch, or a stitch in the ditch, all the way around and came out here. Then I did come back, and I've done some straight line stitching across each of these blocks. So I have that done. The next thing that I want to do is do some straight line stitching right in the stitch in the ditch there on those 3 columns there. And that will pretty much have the back of my a little birthday block quilted. And then once it's completely stitched, and I'll take it to my machine and show you the last stitch in the ditch I'm going to do, then I'm going to trim it up so that it's a 12.5 inch block, and that will make my placemat, my birthday placemat. And I'm going to see if I can find this fabric in my stash and bind the little placemat with that fabric. I think it is a great stocking stuffer for Christmas for people in your family. You could also, if you had an embroidery machine, you could simply embroider their names on each side of the candle. That would be fun. I have my walking foot on here, which allows me to be able to walk over the fabric without causing any puckering. So I highly recommend, if you're going to quilt a quilt on your domestic sewing machine, to get a walking machine, to get a walking foot if you don't have one. Now, as I mentioned, I've already quilted going this direction all across this quilt. Now I want to quilt these lines, and I'm just going to do a stitch in the ditch. I'm going to line it up right up there. Bring my thread up to the top. And then you can do a locking stitch when you begin, which is basically 3 stitches in a row on top of one another. That locks the line of stitching. And now I am simply following that row. It's the seam, and I'm trying to stitch in the ditch. Not doing a very good job of it, but I'm trying here. All right, so I'm down to the other side. Now I'm going to travel across the bottom of this, which is where I've already stitched before, but I'm just going to travel to the second column here and flip it up. And here we go. Again, I'm trying to stitch in the ditch. I'm trying to keep my eye on the camera to ensure that you can see what I'm doing as I'm stitching. So I'm not staying in line very well. Now let me move the camera so I can flip this over and you can see what that looks like from the back. And there we go. You can pretty much see this is the cake, the columns, that's the candle up there. So it is basically ready to go. And I couldn't find this fabric, but I did find some fun fabric that's in the same color family. So I'll use this for my border. My little block is quilted. I am now going to simply square it up and trim away all the excess. I'm going to be adding this binding all the way around. A very bright, cheerful birthday block or birthday placemat. All right, now I'm going to use this block here that I had created in my 52-week series, and I'm going to make a cosmetic bag. And I do have a PDF. It'll be attached in the description box below. You're simply going to place this is the fold line. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. I am going to quilt some Pellon batting to this. If you had the fusible batting, then you could simply just press it to it. I still would recommend quilting it though. That just keeps it nice and secure. But that's going to make this little cosmetic bag a little bit more stable, I think. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. And again, I'm simply going to do some stitching in the ditch on all of these lines. And that's all that I'm going to do, just to secure the Pellon to this piece of this block. And then I am going to cut out the cosmetic bag. And I have actually trimmed up my little template pattern here. And we're simply going to fold it once, fold it again, and then we'll lay this so that this is on the fold. I'm also going to keep this on the fold. And then we'll simply cut out here. And we'll have the whole front and back section of the cosmetic bag ready to go. Then I'm going to use this fabric right here and do the same thing, and it will become the lining. You also need a 9-inch zipper for this. I've completed the quilting. I've simply done a straight line quilting in the ditch on both sides of each of these light green strips here. So that's all I'm doing for quilting. Now I am ready to fold this block in half and in half again. And I might just grab a pin. I've finished cutting out the 2 little squares as well as these on the side. And if we open it up, I have a complete front and back. Yay! Normally you would have to sew this seam right here, but I'm not going to have to worry about that because of the way that I folded it. So the front and the back is ready to go. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the lining. I want to fold again, this is a 12.5-inch block. And this is just a plain piece of fabric, 12.5 inches. And I am going to place this. Again, we have the fold here, and we have the 2 folds here. So I've got my bag ready to go. Here is my lining ready to go. I need to grab a zipper, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to attach the zipper. And it's so easy. This is a very simple way to attach a zipper. To attach the zipper, and this is a 9-inch zipper. This happens to be an invisible one, but it doesn't have to be. Whatever zipper you have will be fine. And if it's a longer one, that's fine too. You can simply cut off the excess. I've folded my zipper in half and marked the halfway point here so that it lines up nicely on the top edge of the bag right here. And so I've also folded my bag in half and marked the halfway point. I'm going to match up those two marks, right sides together. And then I am going to take the lining right sides together and place it on top of there. And we're just going to put the pins right here through all layers. I'm pinning the lining, the zipper, and the bag itself. And I'm going to bring it to my sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch all the way down, and that will secure the bag, the zipper, and the lining. I'll bring it back and show you what that looks like. I've just sewn the lining with the zipper and the back of, or the front of the bag itself. And if you open it up like this, you can see there's the lining, there's the zipper, and if I flip it all the way, there we go. Now it does help as you're sewing, you might have to remove it from your machine and move your zipper back and forward if possible, or use your zipper foot as you're sewing this, and that way you can more easily get around this closure piece here that kind of gets in your way as you're sewing. But that is stitched. What I can do right now is literally top stitch 1/4 inch away all along here, and that will make sure that my lining stays where it's supposed to stay and my top stays where it's supposed to stay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to show you how to finish the other side. All right, this is top stitch. So I have it top stitched so that they'll both stay. I'm going to open this a little bit. Now what we want to do is attach this zipper, the other side of the zipper, to the front of the bag. And then we need to bring this up and also attach it up here and pin all of that. And I think I'm going to pin it this direction because I'm going to be sewing from this side. So as you can see, I've flipped. Here's the front side. It's facing up. I'm going to bring this part of the bag down so that it matches that. I'm going to make sure this zipper top matches the top edge of the bag. There, that's what's important because we're going to sew that zipper to the bag along with this lining right here. So we're going to match all this up. I've got my edges matching nicely. I'm going to pin. And again, if you use your zipper foot, you can more easily sew this because then your foot on your sewing machine doesn't get in the way of that closure. All right, now I'm going to take it to my machine, and I'm again going to sew 1/4 inch seam all the way down here, and I'll bring it back and show it to you. All right, I finished stitching this side, and now we do need to create an opening in a lining. So if you do cut out your lining without putting the bottom on the fold and the lining, that will already have been there for you. And so I'm going to just slice this with my seam ripper and open this up. You need about 2 inches, maybe 3 inches, so that you'll be able to turn the bag right side out when you're done with this. But we're basically going to be stitching from here to here. We're going to line up those edges and make a seam right there. And then we're going to line up these edges, make sure it's in the screen for you. And we're going to stitch here to here. And I'm just using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once we have that done, then we're going to make the little corners in the purse. These corners here will allow the bag to stand up, and you'll see that in a minute. But I'm first going to match these up and get those stitched, and I'll do it on both sides, and I'll bring it back. One other thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to top stitch this side as well, and so I flipped it right side out so that I can top stitch along here at 1/4 inch. I want to finish that before I sew those seams. I've done the top stitching on the zipper itself, and now I've folded it so that I can do the stitching of the seams, and I have pinned here and pinned here. Try to fold your zipper so that one portion folds one way and the other folds the other direction so that it's a flatter seam, and be very careful as you're stitching over that so that you're not breaking needles. So be very careful about that. So I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch here, 1/4 of an inch there. I'll bring it back and show it to you. Oh, and I also did slit a little opening here in my lining, so I have an opening for turning. I've stitched my seams. I am now going to create the little box corners. And if yours is not flat across, just simply trim it so that it's flat. You want that box corner to be flat across, and you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch there, 1/4 of an inch there, and we're going to do the same thing on the lining. We'll put it together, open it up, and again, trim it so that it's a flat seam, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance there, and 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on this side. Then we're ready to turn the bag. My box corners are finished. I have them sewn, and now I can simply turn this little bag right side out here. It sits nicely. This could be used for a pencil bag, for a makeup bag. You could put a little hook on there to hang on to it, use a piece of fabric. You could sew that in there, whatever you choose to. But it's a great little gift that you can give at Christmas time using an orphan block. 2 projects are ready to go. I did attach the binding to the birthday placemat, and I just used a fancy hem stitch or a fancy decorative stitch to finish it on the front. So my placemat is ready to go. My little bag is ready to go. I am going to slip stitch that lining closed on the inside, so I'll get that done. I haven't finished that yet. But 2 projects done. Now let's get to the tote bag. For the Simple Orphan Block open top tote bag, there's a PDF attached, and you'll want to cut out and prepare your pieces. I have one 12.5 inch orphan block that I'm going to use for the front, and this is a 12.5 inch orphan block that I'm going to use for the back. And I have taken the Pellon. If you use fusible, that's wonderful. You can fuse it together, but I do recommend that you also quilt. And I simply did a walking foot straight line stitching across all the different lines. I stitched in the ditch everywhere across that block, as you can see. And I did the same on the 9 patch. Very simple. So now they are completely secure. Quilting these blocks does 2 things for us. It adheres the Pellon batting to the quilt itself. Again, it gives it more structure. That fusible batting is wonderful to give it some structure. So I've got that finished. I have also grabbed 3 of the 12.5 by 3.5 inch fabric pieces. And these are going to be the sides and the bottom of the tote bag. And again, I've gone ahead and just quilted the Pellon down the center. So I've got those 3 pieces ready to go. They're quilted. And then I have the same thing for the lining, minus the Pellon. The lining is simply 2 12.5 inch squares, and the 3 pieces that I'm going to be using for the lining to go around the sides and the bottom. The other thing I created was the handle, and my handle is just basically 1 inch wide. You could make yours much wider if you choose. You could make 2 handles if you choose, whatever you would like to do. But simply, it's a 30-inch piece of fabric. It's a 1 inch piece of fusible batting, or mine is not fusible. I recommend fusible if you have it. Mine is just regular. And I've simply folded the 3.5 inch wide strip around it and pressed it under there by 1/4 of an inch and stitched it down the center, and then I top stitched both sides. So that will be my handle. So 2 of these 3.5 inch wide by 12.5 inch long panels here are going to be the sides of my bag. So I'm going to make them right sides together, and I'm going to sew them 1/4 of an inch on each side of the bag. I'll stitch that and bring it back. Then once they're stitched, I am going to add the backing to this so that I'll have a complete tote all the way around. Then we will need to add the bottom section of our bag to the bottom of this tote. I've sewn the 2 side sections on. Now I'm going to add this And this is the back of the tote. I'm going to sew that there, and I'm going to sew this side over here. I'll get that sewn, and then we'll be attaching the bottom of this to the bag. To sew the bottom of the bag on, I'm simply going to sew each end across first, and then I'll sew the longer sides. So I have pinned each corner into the corner, as you can see here, and I'm going to stitch a 1/2 inch across. And I'm going to come over here, and you see that I've pinned them in the corners there. I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch across that seam, and then I'll come back and pin the rest of this and sew that. I brought it over to the table so you can see it better. I have stitched each of the sides here, as you can see, and I've pinned the front and the back. So that is pinned and ready for me to sew, and I'll take it to the machine and start stitching here and stitch a 1/2 inch on each side. The wonderful thing about the bag is that it stands on its own. It's really got some substance to it. So I've turned it right side out. I've steamed the seams there. And basically my seam allowances all the way around, they're closer to 3/8 of an inch. I don't believe they're as wide as a 1/2 inch. I think that's all 3/8 of an inch is what I used. We need to pin the handles to the top of the bag, and we're going to pin them so that they just kind of hang down in here and make sure that it's not twisted, make sure it's in there properly. And then we're going to create the lining and tuck this whole thing inside the lining so the lining and the bag are right sides together. So the top of this, we're going to leave a seam open in the lining, and that's how we'll turn it right side out. So for the lining, you're simply going to make it the same as the bag itself, where you've got your 12.5 inch back or front, doesn't matter, it's the same. I'm going to sew here. We'll sew here on this side, have a seam allowance there. Then we'll attach the back just like we did before. Then we will attach the bottom, although this time we're only going to sew 3 sides. We're going to leave a side open so that or at least a portion of a side open so that we can turn the bag. I've finished the lining, so it's completed here. I've left one seam open down here at the bottom, so the bottom is all connected except for that, and that's how we'll turn the bag. So right now we need this lining to be wrong side out so that we can slip our bag inside, and that way we'll have the right sides are facing. The right side of the bag is facing the right side of the lining. And then we will pin things in place. Make sure I'm in your screenshot here. So that was my handle there. Make sure you don't get your handle in the way. You want to just sew the seam up here, the raw edge of that seam, and not the handle itself. So get everything in there and kind of straightened out. I'm going to tuck things down in there so that I can sew this, and then I'm going to pin all the way around the top edge, and then I will stitch all the way around the top edge, probably another 3/8 to a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the top, and then we'll open it through that open lining seam allowance. I have sewn the entire edge, top edge of the seam, and now I'm going to flip the tote bag right side out. So I'm going to turn it through that opening in the lining. And I will slip stitch that, or I could even just run a stitch across the bottom there. But for the time being, I'm going to tuck the lining down inside, kind of straighten things out here. And then what we'll be able to do, I'm going to press it. I'll be able to accomplish what I want to when I press it. I'm going to take it to the ironing board and press this down so that I've got a nice crisp edge up there. And then I'm going to top stitch all the way around the top of that bag, about 3/8 of an inch down. My bag is finished. I love it. I've got it top stitched. I finished the seam on the inside. It stands by itself, which I really like. It's got some body, some stability to it. That's the back. There's a front. Actually, it doesn't really matter, front or back. But I love how this bag turned out. Here we have our placemat, and here we have our adorable cosmetic bag, which or a pencil bag. It could be just anything you want. You could fill it with goodies and give it away as a gift. You could create something that coordinates, and this bag could go inside this bag, and what a nice gift that would be. The other thing you could do is have all of this coordinate. Maybe this could be for a child. You could fill it with the birthday placemat. They'd have their own bag. You could fill this with toys of some sort for a little girl or make it all very boyish. There's so much you could do. Just have fun, use your imagination. And I can't wait to see some of the projects that you create with your Orphan blocks. All of this was done with Orphan blocks. Thank you so much for joining me today as we created 3 wonderful gifts using Orphan blocks from our 52-week series of Scrappy blocks, where I taught you for 52 weeks how to use your scrap stash to make some beautiful blocks. And these make some wonderful gifts. I look forward to seeing the projects that you complete. Please don't forget to post them on my Facebook group page. I'll have all of that linked below. All of the video tutorials, the PDFs, etc., they'll all linked below in the description box for you. And please, if you like the content that I provide, it really would be helpful and means so much to me if you would like and comment and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. All of those things really do help my channel, and I really appreciate that. So until next time, and some more gifts to come, happy quilting.